Welcome, Daredevil fans. We are back to cover episode 4. And as far as the season so far, I think this episode had the most confrontations we've seen this season. And when I say confrontations, I'm not actually talking about physical combat. This was an episode about hard conversations, one-on-one conversations between characters. We actually got about 5 or 6 of them. And let's start with the first one between Matt and the niece of the dearly departed White Tiger, Angela Del Toro. So this really set the tone for the entire episode. We're in the morgue. White Tiger's been killed by the police. We know now it was not Frank Castle, like I speculated that hopefully it wasn't, seeing that skull tattoo. The skull tattoo has been adopted by a group of corrupt cops within the NYPD. And unfortunately, White Tiger was just caught unawares and has been murdered. The omelet didn't save him. No superpowers there to bring him back to life. He is out of the picture. And no one is more upset than Angela, who was in the courthouse, thought she saw justice served with her father being, excuse me, her uncle being acquitted, and now he's murdered on the streets shortly thereafter. And there's no leads on who possibly did the killing. So she's correctly upset. She also has probably the most poignant line of the entire episode when Matt is telling her that we need to believe that justice will be served, that his killer will be caught. She says that he's just Hector from the Heights. They're the police. They have all the power in this situation. So we already see now, for those who haven't read the comic book, this is the pipeline where we'll see eventually Angela take on the White Tiger mantle. She's still a little young at this point, but this is something that may happen down the line. But for such a young actress, I think most of her credits so far, the actress Camila Rodriguez has done mostly Disney fare. This is one of her more serious roles and serious scenes, and I feel that she nailed it. She had the anguish, the anger, wanting to have retribution, but not having the means to do so. Her idea of justice being shattered. You saw all that on her face. I thought that was well performed by Camilla. So kudos to her. And with Matt, him being the lawyer, he's hanging on by a thread. We see throughout this episode, even himself, someone who's been in the justice system, one who's been an advocate for the disenfranchised. Slowly, it's starting to erode um, every single point this episode, and it leads to the final talk that he has with Frank Castle, the Punisher, who shows up this episode. But before we get there, after that conversation, then he has the talking about Matt, the confrontation with the corrupt officer Powell in the hallway. And, Matt is goading him, letting him know that I'm not backing down. If you come at me again, you're going to need more police next time. But I think instinctively, Matt knows that this is another situation where even if Officer Powell isn't directly involved, he knows who is among this corrupt group of cops. That situation, that Officer Powell is still able to walk around with impunity, you can tell that's upsetting Matt. That's another strike this episode to his idea of justice being served. So that's another confrontation where Matt is looking at what type of system am I upholding. But the big one for Matt, which I think is strike three, is the situation with Leroy. What was his last name? Leroy Bernard, I think it was. The man who was caught petty theft, stealing out of the bodega, really just wanting to have dessert. He has a long rap sheet, bad attitude. You look at him on the surface, you look at this is someone that doesn't need to be out in the streets. He's had so many opportunities and he's always ending up back in jail. That's what his track record shows if you just look at the police record. But everybody has a story behind their lives, and we see a little bit of why Leroy is in the situation. He gets locked up the first time. He loses his Social Security benefits, not able to get it back. He's out in the street now, no means to eat, forces him to steal again. And then he gets locked up again. Now you can't get a job because you have a record. What are you going to do now to eat? So it's a recurring cycle. And Matt is starting to see that the whole idea of justice in this country has never been about reform. Once you're in that system slowly destroys you. That record will always follow you. You're not going to be able to get a job. Now you're losing your benefits. There's no safety nets for someone like Leroy. And even though he's lashing out at Matt, who's blind and is there on the surface to help him, he really looks at Matt as a representation of this recurring nightmare in hell that he stays in, which is the justice legal system. And Matt is starting to see he did all that work when he went into the courtroom and talked to the prosecutor, sweet talked her, um, really showed off his people skills, his persuasiveness. He thought he did all that to keep his client out of jail, was happy with himself, got it reduced down from 20 days, I believe, to 10. And he's like, you've already been here for a couple of days, you'll be out soon, thinking he scored a win. And then he comes back to his client and it hits him like a ton of bricks that he's really just putting him back into another nightmare, talking about Leroy, and there's no answers that he has for him. So I think that last conversation is what pushed Matt to go and seek out Frank Castle. I'm not sure for what. I think he was just wanting some perspective on whether is this really the route I want to go down? Do I really want to be like the Punisher and taking justice into my own hands? Do I want to go down that route? And funny enough, with that confrontation with Frank, Frank is thinking that he's persuading Matt to see it more from his side. Frank is talking about how my family was murdered. He sees his child every night, and his child is telling him to kill all those bad guys out there that are still out there. That's his motivation for Frank. And Frank is thinking that he's getting Matt to see that perspective more until he forces Matt or challenges Matt to say Foggy's name, who we all know passed away in the first episode. But it's that moment that Matt was not able to do for these last three episodes that really brings him back into perspective. Now he's thinking he can visualize his friend, and now he's saying, how can I truly honor Foggy's memory? Do I honor Foggy's memory by going down the Punisher's path, like what Punisher thinks he's doing with his son, or do I honor Foggy by living what his legacy was while he was here? And he decides to take that path. And that leads to him starting to slowly start his training again. Now he's seeing more that Daredevil is needed, and this is what I need to do to redeem the city. And I love the way that's probably my favorite shot this episode, seeing Matt on the rooftop slowly going through, kata motions with his weaponry, and it's contrasted with Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, sitting, not doing the same type of training. And the reason I bring that up is because I think despite all that Wilson is doing, he is getting a little bit more comfortable as far as this type of life that he's living as the mayor. He's not having to get his hands dirty as much. So I think Matt is getting a sharper edge that's going to benefit him when he eventually has that showdown with the Kingpin. But that doesn't mean Wilson is getting soft, because as we know, we've seen his hands the last couple episodes and there's been bruising on them. And we're wondering who he's been fighting, because he's been doing all these mayoral duties. And we find out the person that he's been torturing is his wife's side piece, Adam, who's disappeared, as he had mentioned in his therapy session. We didn't know. We thought disappeared meant that he gave Matt the opportunity to get out of the city because he made the promise to his wife that he wouldn't hurt him. But no, this is a fate worse than death. He's keeping them confined and is essentially torturing him every single day. And to me, that doesn't bode well for Vanessa. That's the other confrontation that we have, Vanessa and Wilson in therapy. And there's still a lot that's unsaid between them, but we got a little bit more perspective on why Vanessa was so hurt, because Wilson leaving reminded her of her father leaving, always not being there, always being emotionally distant. And because of that, she felt that she needed to lash out and to have something to live for, as she put it, to do something for herself. And that was represented in Adam. Now, when Wilson leaves, the therapist, Heather, does ask Vanessa, do you feel safe around him? And Vanessa confidently says that Wilson would never hurt me. That to me might be famous last words, because I think Vanessa in her mind is thinking physical danger. He would never physically abuse me. But I think Wilson is definitely capable of severe emotional abuse, because I think eventually she's going to find Adam wherever he's hidden away, wherever he's stashed at. She's going to find him broken down, tortured for ever months. He might not even be alive at that point. And that type of anguish, I think, is going to really fracture their relationship, because at this point, Wilson is telling her on the surface that I don't want to keep any more secrets. I don't want you keeping secrets from me. And here's the biggest secret he's keeping about this torture that he's doing of her lover. So I definitely think that that's a ominous statement that Vanessa made about Wilson not hurting her. I think she's setting herself up for a big emotional hit down the line in this season. The other scene that really stood out to me, one of my favorite scenes, would be another confrontation we got with Michael Gandolfini playing Daniel Blake and Wilson after Daniel admits that he messed up, that he got played like a fiddle by BB Urich, who was able to get that information out of him when he had too much to drink, puts Wilson on Front Street as a potential union buster, which is a no-no in Staten Island. So now Wilson is out to, out for blood, wanting someone's head. And instead of having the entire team face the backlash, Daniel did step up and admit to Wilson to his face that he was the one that leaked the information unintentionally. And as far as we've seen, even going back to the Netflix show, Daniel is one of the few people to really come face to face with Kingpin and being willing to accept whatever consequences might happen. Now, what saved him to me is he put together one of the best apologies I've ever seen. He was just completely contrite, said I'll accept whatever punishment, even when I'm fired or removed from this your mayoral staff. I'm still going to campaign for you. I still believe in your message. And it totally disarmed Wilson. I think he's never seen that type of contriteness in another person, even in Vanessa. And you really started to see a father-son dynamic between them. And I think Daniel is, unless he messes up again, he is completely within Wilson's good graces at this point. And Sheila being there, I thought that was a nice touch because she seemed like the concerned mother worrying about Daniel's safety at that point when he's making this apology. But, Wilson, I think now trusts him more than Sheila. So now Sheila, even with all of her experience in politics, doesn't realize she's on the hot seat now because now Daniel has Kingpin's ear more than she does, even with all of her experience. So I think this is a turning point on the political side where Daniel starts coming more to the forefront. And I don't necessarily think that that's a good thing because without that experience, I think he's going to be making a lot of rash decisions, which I think in the long run is going to sink Kingpin's mayoral, not campaign, his mayoral seat for the duration of his run. So we'll see where that goes there with Daniel. I think we've covered all of the confrontations. I do want to touch more on where the Punisher goes from here, because obviously he made a comment as far as stating that he is not on the same page with these fanboys that have been adopting the Punisher logo and the image, talking about the cops, totally dismissing them as fanboys. Although that was a good touch because we've seen that happening in reality with a lot of aggressive police taking on or wanting to be like the Punisher, which is scary to think about. So where is he going to do now? Because Matt mentioned that you're obviously trying to hunt somebody. He didn't mention the target, but I think he's going to play a big role in Muse, who we got to see as a serial killer in this episode. He's been the one snatching bodies off of the streets and doing experiments on them and doing his own twisted version of his Andy Warhol type of art. So we saw some glimmers of that. It still seems like a side quest. It seems more, he is more, even though he's a Daredevil villain, I'd like to see him more go up against the Punisher as a serial killer. I think that fits more, and it's a good way to bring Frank Castle back into the fold, that along with dealing with the corrupt cops who have adopted his logo. So I think that is where I'd like to see things go. It still feels like a side quest, so I don't see how Muse is really going to be incorporated with Kingpin's storyline, except for the fact that he ties into the whole vigilante type of thing that Kingpin is trying to clean up. But he just seems like a lone wolf, just kind of out there operating. And it seems like they're going to do a short arc for maybe 2 or 3 episodes that kind of focuses on Muse in the background and Daredevil and possibly Punisher teaming up to take him down. But very intriguing as we get to the midpoint of the season where we're at now. Hopefully we'll get justice for White Tiger. I'd love to see Angela starting to try and take on that mantle, even though she's very young. Maybe she steals the omelet and we see her working with it for the, in the background for a few episodes. Frank Castle is now back in the picture, so I'm expecting to see him in every episode or the majority of the episodes for the remainder of the season. Karen is still out of the picture. We don't know if anything's going to bring her back. So Matt is still out there on his own, trying to navigate and trying to come up with a way to honor Foggy and get back to some semblance of himself and realize that it's up to him to take on that Daredevil mantle again. So maybe the Muse in these murders, that's what's going to push him to get back on the street. But it has to be a tipping point that we have not yet seen yet. So thank you for watching. I'm looking forward to joining you guys again next week to cover episode 5 of Born Again. Let me know your thoughts on this episode. This was very kind of a dialogue heavy episode. Which confrontation did you enjoy the most? I think I'm gonna go with Angela and Matt, and I'll have Matt and Frank as a close second. But let me know what you think. I look forward to hearing from you guys and have a good weekend and see you guys next week to cover episode 5.